Hello, I'm Rebecca, and I'm going to be presenting an overview of my PhD, Representations of Embodied Mental Illness in Interactive Narrative Forms. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white woman with long dark brown hair wearing a green t-shirt. I'm going to be using slides today, but every text and image on my slides will be spoken or described. I do want to note that my presentation does discuss mental illness and topics like suicide, self-harm, and psychosis. Today I'm going to give you an overview of how I'm using my PhD project as an excuse to play video games, read comics, and write fanfiction, whilst also looking for a way to express my severe and chronic mental illness. Because if there's one common theme amongst people with mental illness, and there's not many, it's that we're all desperately struggling for ways to explain ourselves to others. I can explain my symptoms to you in isolation, but that doesn't tell you what it feels like to have those symptoms. And it definitely doesn't tell you what it's like to have those symptoms every day for your entire life. My PhD thesis explores a selection of media forms that I believe can show you what it's like to live like I do. Media that is immersive enough to make you feel like me, interactive enough to make you act like me, and multisensory enough to make it believable. Media that can connect you so deeply to my experience that you feel, for a short while and in a safe way, like you are living it. Now, this can't convey the experience of my illness entirely. You still remain fundamentally yourself and you bring all of your memories and personality with it. But it comes a lot closer than just listing how symptoms work. Now, as you will have seen from the title, one of my major themes is interactivity. The moment you start interacting directly and actively with something, rather than passively consuming, like with standard books or films, your experience of the interaction is heightened significantly. Within video games and visual and interactive novels, as well as role-playing, the player, or reader, is required to make choices that determine the direction the narrative takes. Sometimes this is an illusion. The narrative may actually be a limited set of branching paths, but to the player it may feel unlimited. This results in an ownership over the actions of the narrative, a sense of agency that allows them to identify as the avatar, not just with them. This is a necessary distinction for conveying the embodied experience of mental illness, because if you identify with a character, you're observing their experience. If you identify as a character, you're feeling their experience. Interactivity plays a key role in artist books. On the screen now is an example of such a book. This is Mind Maps by Penny Alexander, which is in the prescriptions collection here at Kent. It is a black and white hand-bound book, made with what looks like handmade paper that has been frayed to partially cover the text beneath. On the left is a pointillistic map with no words, and on the right, under the frayed paper, you can just read the words Mental Health Breakdowns 1 at the bottom. Because an artist's book is a physical artifact that must be handled, it is by its very nature interactive and immersive, qualities that place it alongside these other mediums, such as video games, that might otherwise seem a really strange comparison. But handling artist books is a visceral experience, grounding the sense of reality in the present moment. The responsibility that's added in as the handler of such a unique object only serves to heighten this experience. For example, with this book, you could try and lift that frayed edge to see more of the text beneath, but you will, hopefully, feel an intense responsibility not to damage it. In the interactive novel Depression Quest, the player attempts to get through life as a person with severe depression. The image here shows a section from the game, where the protagonist is struggling having gotten home from work. You can see at the bottom that there is a status given for their depression, their therapy or lack of it, and their medication or lack of it. There are also 4 options listed for action: ordering food, trying to work, watching TV, and going to bed. Cleverly, the first of these options, ordering food, is shown, but in red and crossed out. By both giving and restricting the reader's agency, Depression Quest simulates the frustration of living with depression, where things that should be possible are instead made to be impossible. Comics, or graphic novels, may not strike you as interactive, but they have considerable power to manipulate the reader by playing with how we instinctively view and interpret images. In this way, they can effectively navigate the question of temporal continuity or distortion, another key aspect of immersion into the embodied experience of mental illness. Ali Brosh's Solutions and Other Problems gives an excellent example of the representation of temporal distortion. Following the reveal of Brosh's sister's abrupt death by suicide, the comic goes into a dozen pages that lack any text whatsoever, showing only a collection of images of Brosh and her sister as young children. 2 of those pages are shown on the screen here, with images of the girls in the car together, one of them drawing on the other with crayon, making sandcastles, and pointing at a cactus. These pages do not have page numbers, unlike the rest of the book, indicating a deliberate choice to sever the reader from temporal continuity, trapping them instead in the non-temporal experience of grief. In the video game Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, the developers worked closely with psychologists and people who experience psychosis to be able to present a game that was as authentic an experience of psychosis as possible. This was achieved through a multisensory immersion. Sound design simulates Senua's auditory hallucinations, while images are used to show her visual hallucinations. To represent the voices she hears, they utilised 3D binaural audio, which is recording with 2 microphones at once to get full 3D. This created greater immersion by making it sound like the voices are coming from different places. Meanwhile, her visual hallucinations became a part of the game's mechanics, something you have to engage with and use to help you move onwards. You can see an example of that in the image I'm showing now, which is taken in the game's photo mode, and shows Senua surrounded by images of the Dagaz rune. This is a puzzle where you need to locate the rune in her surroundings. Here, 4 trees connect to show the rune's image. This game also has a VR version, furthering the use of technology to improve immersion and thus better convey the embodied experience of psychosis. Now, fanfiction might seem like a strange companion to video games and interactive novels. It doesn't inherently provide the sort of immersive experience we've discussed. The end product is similar in structure to normal fiction. What makes fanfiction's relationship to the embodied experience interesting is how the writer experiences producing their text, and how the reader then engages with that text. The fanfiction author has their world already built around them, and more room to focus on other things. However, they also have limitations. Stray too far and they will no longer be constructing a transformative work, but a disjointed semi-original. These limitations, however, can be the freedom unto themselves. With less room, there are fewer choices to be made, and more focus can be put on telling other aspects of the story. The reader, meanwhile, then selects their text in a unique way. They don't search by genre, but by fandom and even by tags. Descriptive text that ranges from thematic, like drama, to hilarious, like I'm horrible to these characters because I love them. On this slide I'm showing you is a screen capture of the Archive of Our Own, the largest fanfiction archive at present and the 2nd largest literature site in the US. It shows the master tag mental health issues and tags with the same meaning. You can see that they range from things like mental health issues and canon typical mental health issues to things like maybe a lot fucked in the head and it's mental health in it. These tags are folksonomic, meaning they're user generated, and they are then wrangled by archive volunteers into collected categories like this. Tag wranglers follow strict rules to ensure they do not impinge on the folksonomic nature of tagging, preserving the user's freedom and that reader experience. Now, you might be asking yourself what the purpose behind understanding these things is. It's all very interesting, but what use does it have? Now, I've talked already about Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. A study of this game found evidence that the game is helping people to better identify with, understand, and appreciate the difficulties of people experiencing psychosis. This article examined the impact of the game upon mental illness stigma, concluding that, quote, video games can reduce stigma as long as the portrayal shown in the game is not stigmatizing. This is the difference in texts that have been produced by or in conjunction with the mentally ill. In order to accurately represent our experiences, we must be present in the conversation around and creation of these texts. If you're not, you get situations like in early editions of the World of Darkness role-playing games, and I'm showing on screen the cover of the first edition of Vampire the Masquerade. In these games, characters could acquire what were known as derangements, which were either supernatural effects or mundane mental illnesses such as PTSD, OCD, and DID. These were generally acquired through some form of trigger occurring in-game. However, they could also be used at character creation using the merits and flaws system. This means that in exchange for a mental illness, a character gained more points to spend on other skills, like combat or social prowess. This setup was clearly problematic and ableist. It builds upon the trope that disabled people are valuable only because their disability is in exchange for some kind of gift. This has since been removed, but the ableist legacy continues in role-playing games as a whole and is being fought back against by disability activists now. So if my thesis is looking for anything, it's this. How can these media forms transmit the embodied experience? Why do they work the way that they do? And what difference can it make to have more authentic representations of this embodied experience out in the world? Thank you. If you found that interesting and you'd like to know more, you can find me on Twitch several days a week at twitch.tv/melodioustier, and you can also find me at Twitter and Instagram at the same username. Thanks very much for watching.